It was the fall of 1994 in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, when I had my startling Bigfoot encounter. We were camping at the Sherwood Lake recreation area, enjoying a peaceful family getaway. One evening, my son and I decided to take a nighttime walk around part of the lake. The night was beautiful, bright with stars, and the temperature was comfortably in the 50s. As we wandered along, we found ourselves near a marshy area just off the trail, close to a meadow at the lake's edge. Suddenly, we heard a loud commotion, sticks breaking, brush rustling. We figured it might be other campers searching for firewood. However, what we saw next left us utterly shocked. Two large, black, upright creatures were about 125 feet away, ripping branches and bark off the trees. They seemed to be eating the bark. My son and I were frozen in place, terrified yet fascinated. I quickly instructed him to crouch down behind a rock. For about 15 intense minutes, we watched in absolute fear and awe. The smaller creature could reach about 10 to 12 feet up the tree, and the larger one was even taller. Our nerve-wracking observation continued until the two creatures suddenly stepped back into the woods. Just then, a third, even taller one emerged. At this point, the fear hit us full force, and I told my son we needed to get out of there immediately. We ran all the way back to our camper, and I told my father what we had seen. He brushed it off, thinking it was just a bear, but I knew there was no way it was a bear. These things were far too tall and moved too easily upright. The next day, I returned to the spot. I found several stripped tree branches and limbs at the base of the trees, but no tracks. Despite the lack of physical evidence, I was convinced of what I'd seen. Years went by, and I stopped talking about the experience because no one ever believed me. Still, my curiosity was piqued. I spent a lot of time in that area across all seasons, hoping to find more evidence. One summer, while swimming in the lake, I believed I saw tracks in the shallows about 8 feet deep. Another time, my wife and I camped there for over a month in December. The ground was covered in snow, and we were the only ones around. One night, we heard loud knocking sounds coming from several locations, almost like the creatures were signaling each other. One knock was so close and loud it terrified our three dogs. They didn't even bark, which was unusual for them. Curious, we tried to talk to locals about their experiences, though many were reticent. One lady shared her story with us. She didn't know about our encounter, but had her own strange experience. She often walked her dogs around the lake in the mornings. One summer day, she noticed a dark, fur-covered figure at the edge of the woods near the picnic area. Her usually fearless dogs were terrified, hiding behind her instead of barking. Realizing it wasn't human, she backed away, and the figure disappeared into the woods. Since then, she hadn't returned to that part of the lake. This mix of personal encounters and shared stories keeps my curiosity alive, even if the experiences have left us uncomfortable and somewhat edgy about those woods. It was the day before Thanksgiving in 2007. I was in Fayette County, West Virginia, right at the new River Gorge, deer hunting. It was the early evening, with about 2 hours of daylight left, when I noticed movement about 60 yards toward the gorge from my position. I raised my rifle and looked through the scope to get a better look. After about 10 seconds, I saw something that stunned me. A really large hand appeared from the side of a large tree. It was just the palm of the hand against the tree, mainly showing the fingers. Then, to my surprise, a head peeked around the tree. Staring back at me were two large eyes on a creature I had never seen before. I've been hunting since I was 8 years old, and at 38, I've seen a lot. But this was different. The creature blinked twice and then stepped back behind the tree. For about 20 seconds, I kept looking at it through my scope while it was looking back at me. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what I was seeing. What could this be? I had no desire to shoot it, even though I could have easily done so. Being in a sort of shock, my mind and body froze. I realized that I had to pass near that location on my way out of the woods. I was terrified, even with a loaded gun. My hair was standing on end. I knew I'd have to go towards that tree to get out of the woods. Somehow, I managed to get back to my Jeep. I called my uncle and told him what happened. He actually believed me. He knew me as a very honest person who wouldn't lie about something like this. I never heard the creature run away or move through the leaves, but at about 200 yards off, it just disappeared. I went home very shaken by the experience. It definitely changed my life. Now, I knew for a fact that it was out there. It was a really cool experience, though terrifying at the time. The creature seemed to be at least 7 feet tall. It had very dark pupils, almost owl-like eyes, and brownish blonde fur. Its face was visible and clean, not what you'd expect. It almost resembled those troll faces they used to put on pencils when we were kids. Its fingers were long and thick with no fur, and it had dark fingernails. My rifle scope was on the 9 power, making it look like it was about 30 feet away. All I know is that it felt very real to me, and I'll never forget this experience. In the summer of 2006, in Boone County, West Virginia, I had a Bigfoot experience I'll never forget. At the time, I worked for a monitoring lab that did late-night bat surveys. We got a job to check for Indiana bats on an active mine site. On the second night of our 6-day survey, my coworker and I were heading to check one of the nets when we heard this insanely loud whooping noise nearby, like 30 feet from us. It was late, around 1 in the morning. At first, I thought someone was messing with us, trying to scare us with howling noises. But then it happened again, and I knew there was no way a person made that sound. I froze on the spot. I scanned the tree line with my flashlight, but couldn't see anything. Then I heard rustling in the woods nearby, and something big was moving through it. The next night, I was on another part of the survey. 2 of my co-workers were in the area where I had been the night before. At the end of their shift, they told me they heard noises in the woods and found an area that had been trampled down by something much larger than a deer or bear. On the last night of our survey, I found myself back where I had heard the noises earlier, feeling a bit more confident since nothing strange had happened since that first night. I went to check the nets with 2 of my coworkers at around 2 in the morning. Just as before, in that same spot, I heard a single high-pitched whoop. I jumped but was ready this time and shone my flashlight towards the noise. About 40 yards in front of us, I saw a large bipedal creature cross the road. It was massive, around 7 feet tall, and covered in short, coarse black hair, except for its face. It looked straight at us as it crossed the road, and in just 2 steps, it was gone, up the embankment on the other side. Terrified, the 3 of us bolted back to my truck. One of my coworkers grabbed a club from the back for protection. Just then, my boss and another technician showed up. The 5 of us then went to check out where I had seen the Bigfoot. In the mud, we found 2 distinct footprints, both larger than any of our shoes. We also saw the grass was trampled down, and broken twigs indicated something big had moved through the brush quickly. We packed up our nets and took off. We were all terrified, but strangely enough, it didn't stop me from wanting to come back and gather more evidence as soon as I got the chance. In 2006, in Barber County, West Virginia, I was driving alone one night. I had just passed a small group of houses on my right when the highway started curving to the right. There was a long guardrail on the right side of the road. As I came around the curve, my headlights caught something up ahead, standing on the white line on the right side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a very tall, lanky human, maybe about 6.5 feet tall, with long reddish hair and a beard. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't wearing any clothes. It had reddish brown hair all over its entire body. The hair length and texture kind of reminded me of a horse's mane, smooth, not matted. My first thought was maybe it was some very tall monkey-like animal. I didn't see its eyes because I figured it had closed them as my headlights stunned it. It stood frozen, very stiff, with extra long arms hanging down by its side. As my car went by, it didn't move at all. It was so close to my car that I thought my side mirror might hit it, but it didn't. The encounter lasted only about 10 seconds, but it left me thinking, was that a Bigfoot? But I dismissed it quickly because I thought those things didn't exist, and even if they did, they wouldn't be in West Virginia. I always heard they lived in the Pacific Northwest. I kept driving, absolutely terrified, and there was no way I was going back to check it out. All the way home, I kept shaking, and my mind kept racing with the thought that it looked so human, like nothing I'd ever seen before. When I got home, I decided to look it up on the internet and discovered that there had been incident reports and even expeditions in West Virginia for this creature. There were even incidents reported in my county. My heart nearly stopped when I read a report from the same area where I had my encounter. While I did consider reporting what happened to me, my family discouraged it. Despite my skepticism, I decided to report it anyway. I believed what I saw was some type of animal, and I didn't think it was hunting anything or anyone. Honestly, I didn't want it hunted down either. This is something I will never forget.